we've changed the American dream to the negative, really, and partially by having such restrictive and exclusionary policies that have just priced people out of the market. And then, you have other businesses buying properties also and all that, but there's just not inventory and affordable stuff for people to get. And so I think it's great work. I'm late to the game. Like I said, I'm glad you guys have been on top of it.
Yeah. And somebody who has 4 adult children who are buying homes or have bought homes, they struggled. I mean, there's not enough inventory. We're like 125,000 units short in Michigan of what we should have. And when you have abundant housing, you have less or more affordable housing. And the average home across the country, before they even put a shovel in the ground, a quarter of the money that you pay for that building goes to the government in one way or another. And if it's a multi-unit, like an apartment unit, 40% of that cost goes to the government in fees and fines and regulations, whatever it takes to get the project built.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
So if you've been listening, you know that over the last number of months, we've been talking about Americans for Prosperity's One Small Step campaign. And, it's a campaign highlighting the small actions that people took, the one step they took to get involved, to change their community, to change their state and their nation even. And it's about taking that step to get involved and make a difference in politics and public policy in this case. That comes in all shapes and sizes. People have different backgrounds, have different looks as to how they did it. Right now, we are at Americans for Prosperity's annual event where we gather our entire staff together to strategize, to get together, have fun with one another, and talk about the future and become inspired. And what's awesome is that there's a whole bunch of people here who have really inspiring stories, great stories about how they took that one small step to get involved. And most of them now are doing it professionally as their career. So I'm excited to bring some of those stories to you, and we're excited to talk to a friend of mine, Tim Golding. Tim is our Americans for Prosperity Michigan State Director. He had a career in business, a successful business, but really saw things that were of concern to him and his family and decided to take a step to get involved, and now is doing it professionally, fighting for freedom and liberty in the state of Michigan. So, Tim, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, David. I'm happy to be doing it too. It's been a great changing career.
Great. I think, talk to me about the first business, kind of the first stage of your life, your career life. I mean, right. I think what was it for like 92 to 09 thereabouts that you had a whole different career. Talk to me about that and how you came into that career.
Right. So my twin brother and I started a residential building and remodeling company after we got our college degrees. And we had grown up doing that with our father, building homes and remodeling homes. So we thought, you know what? Our degrees were totally different from what we did in the business, but we started it anyway and grew that, had a wonderful time providing for our families, providing for our subcontractors and our employees and doing all that. But along the way, being in business and seeing how from when we started in 92 or 93 to, when we ended up close, or when I left the business, how much influence the government has in your business and how much money they take out of your business, and how much money at the end of the day they take out of the customer's pocket, right? So seeing that along the way was frustrating, and I knew at some point I was going to have to get involved and have a seat at the table when decisions were being made that affected my business, seeing what went on in the hospital where my wife is a nurse at the University of Michigan and some of the changes there, and then also at the public school education system and how it was doing a disservice, I felt, to the kids in Michigan. So I just started getting involved with school boards and different things and paying more attention. And that got me starting to take a first step. We had some stuff happen at the school that got me involved, and that got me in contact with some state legislators and built some relationships with them. And then COVID hit. And when COVID hit and our governor said nobody could work except for her chosen few, that didn't set well with me, right? So
yeah, Michigan was a particularly bad place then. It seemed really unjust.
Yes, it was awful. So being self-employed, we've still found ways to make money, of course. But seeing what it did to other businesses and how people lost their jobs and businesses were shuttered because of it just really put me over the edge. And during that time, I got involved closely with our Senate Majority Leader in Michigan, Mike Shirkey, and he got me involved in a petition drive to claw back some of our freedoms. And in that, again, I got to meet more legislators from the state and during that time, having a challenging argument with the Senate Majority Leader on my front porch. He left, and about an hour later, he said, "Hey, have you ever considered running for office?" And I said, "I have, but it's never been the right time." And he said, "Well, now's the right time. You need to run for office."
So sometimes I'm interested when we talk about this one small step campaign in like the practical action that happened.
Right.
So in this case, you saw injustice with regard to the lockdowns around COVID in Michigan, and you said, "Hey, I'm going to be part of this petition campaign." And my understanding is you were really good at getting a lot of petition signatures.
I did.
Like, in a way, like you stepped up as a volunteer community organizer to try to make this happen. So that petition campaign became your first small step to a bigger one of now being recruited to run for the Michigan State Senate.
Yeah, it was a really great experience to go around and try to build that community of people that were concerned about their freedoms being taken away from by the government. And I went all over this not the whole state, but all over our area. And I did collect a lot of signatures and got people to help do that. Made a lot of great relationships. Some of the people I'm still friends with today. But it helped me see and understand what other people's point of view, being self-employed for as long as I was, dealt with a lot of homeowners and, building projects and stuff like that. But being in that setting really helped me see that people see the world differently than I do. Mm-hmm. And that was good for me to see that. I thought everybody thought like Tim did, and that'd be a pretty boring world if it was the case, but it gave me a different point of view, and it's another lit another fire under me to get involved and like to protect and help and serve people in a way. I didn't want to go there for money. It would have been a pay cut. I didn't want to go there for any power. I just truly wanted to make a difference in my community. So whether that was my wife's nursing career or the kids in their schools, and then in business, and to try to claw back again more of the freedoms and opportunity that have been taken away from us over the years in government. Like if you look in business, the amount of regulations to build a home and the things you have to do to get a permit, all of that just ends up costing the homeowner more money. So they can't do they can't put that money back into their home that they're remodeling or building. And if they could, they would do something different maybe, but the government keeps taking more and more of that money. And I wanted to have a seat at the table so I could make a change.
And so, since you're sitting here, I imagine the Senate race wasn't successful.
No, it wasn't. And that's actually how I learned about AFP. And when you're running for office, you meet a lot of people in organizations, and you fill out their surveys and see if you align with them. And AFP endorsed my campaign, endorsed me as a candidate, and got to learn more about AFP and the things that they fight for every day, both in Michigan and across the country. And so it was a pretty blue district. It wasn't a very conservative district, but it was a new district at the time because they just redistricted. Mm-hmm. So my wife and I went into the race just to run hard, and whether we win or lose didn't matter, but we just kind of were doing what God thought he wanted us to do. So I kind of didn't work for a year. I did a little bit. Don't tell my brother. But just campaigned. We ended up coming up short, but in the end of the day, when we lost, we talked about it. I didn't want to give up what I started in politics, the relationships I'd made, and I learned that AFP had a job opening. So I said, I'm going to apply. So we did that, and here I am.
I remember that well.
Yeah, you were on the interviews.
I did. I interviewed you, and I remember being really impressed. I had to outvote everybody else because everybody wasn't as impressed, I guess. But,
right.
What I really loved about your background, and this is pertinent to what we're talking about, is you had been an entrepreneur, started a business, and then came to wanting to be involved in politics and public policy,
right,
from a very genuine place. You really cared about what you wanted to make a difference on issues you really cared about. Mm-hmm. So tell me what you think about now earning your paycheck, like your career being in politics and public policy. Like, how do you feel about that?
I love it. I absolutely love the ability that I have to make a difference in people's lives. And it's obviously incremental gains most of the time, but dealing with state lawmakers and federal lawmakers, dealing with grassroots people, I love every bit of it. And I think we are making a difference both in Michigan and across the country. And when you have the ability to dig in and get paid to do it, it's rewarding. I mean, I've had really 3 careers in my life, mm-hmm. orthopedic sales, construction business, and this. And I don't think I've worked a day in my life. I love what I do.
It's wonderful.
And when I was running for office, there was a few jobs that we were doing for one customer that we'd done a lot of remodeling for over the years in different homes that he'd owned. And he was of a different persuasion politically than I was. And we were talking about it one day at a job we were doing for him in Ann Arbor. And he said, we might not agree on everything politically, but he says, you would make a great politician you'd be great in politics. And I asked him why. He said, because you're good at building relationships with people and really listening and leaning in and trying to find common ground. And that's really what politics is in my mind. It's relational. People have to compromise. Not that you have to give up on your core principles and who you are and what you truly believe and what you would die for, but being willing to sit down in a room and talk with people and come up with solutions that best satisfy what our state, what our counties, whatever need, was appealing to me. And having the opportunity to do that every day is very, very rewarding for me.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk about a lot is fulfillment, and is basically like do you feel like you're becoming the person you want to be through the work that you're doing? And I've always found it so gratifying to wake up in the morning and feel good about what I'm doing. Doesn't mean I love what I'm doing every day. I mean, I got to do that expense report. I have to have that difficult conversation. Those are all different, but I have to go talk to you on the podcast. But in general, to really believe in what you're doing and to enjoy it is a real blessing. And I think it's huge. And I feel like it actually gets the best out of people. I feel like I innovate better. I'm more excited to work. I'm going to work hard because it's what I care about and what I love. And I bring my A game, and I'm not looking around for other things to do. It's because I'm locked in. And, I have felt blessed to work at Americans for Prosperity for over 14 years now. It's over half my work life, and it is over half my work life. And it's just been a great experience. That's why I'm excited here for all staff to see our colleagues and talk to folks like you. Yeah.
No, I think self-actualizing, and God gave me gifts and abilities and talents that I used in business. My twin brother and I have very different personalities, and he was very different.
Are you guys fraternal or identical?
We are identical. I've had to show people my driver's license to prove that I'm not Tom before.
But you have very different personalities.
Very different personalities, and people that know us would say so. But he would run the jobs and build the jobs and do stuff. And I got to the business was so big that I got to the point where I just sold and estimated and put contracts together and stuff like that. But using my ability to deal with people, come up with solutions that best fit the homeowner's needs, right? They couldn't get everything they wanted, and I couldn't get everything I wanted, but coming up with a contract that was mutually agreeable to both parties. And you get to do that in politics every day. I really do believe that I am being self-actualized and using my gifts and abilities and talents that God gave me to make a difference in people's lives.
Well, some states are a lot easier to make a difference in than Michigan. And I mean, you've for, what is going on 6 years, probably, Governor Whitmer has, let's say, advanced policies that we would think have not been optimal for unleashing freedom, liberty, and opportunity in Michigan. In fact, we feel like they probably moved them backwards. And it's a swing state legislatively in the legislature, and there's always something going on in the U.S. Senate and in Congress. It's kind of ground zero, with a handful of other states for politics, just at multi-level politics. And what I always thought is interesting about Michigan is the activist base, the grassroots there are very pronounced and very engaged, and sometimes really radicalized.
Oh yes, definitely.
Sides.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating state, and so it's got to be a real challenge being the state director. So tell me what, your approach to politics in Michigan and how you have found it. And then I want to get in a little bit about some of the things you guys are doing and the main policies we're talking about.
Right. My approach is to first of all, working at the political level and the policy level and doing all that and trying to mix those together and find equilibrium is difficult at times. But in Michigan, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of state and federal races that are very important and critical to a lot of the work we want to do. So trying to figure out which candidates best fit and align with what we want to do and getting behind them and supporting those. But when you do that, sometimes you don't make that radical base or some of the people that are a little bit more radical in the grassroots. You have to figure out a way to make them okay with your choice of candidate when they might not have really originally liked that candidate. But trying to have the conversation like Ronald Reagan, if that person's with you 80% of the time, they're your friend and you should support them. Maybe not during the primary, but after the primary. And I think that's one area where politics has lacked in the last several years is these headstrong people that don't want to get behind the winner in the primary to push our conservative agenda in this case. And that's one thing we try to have these conversations with people and just, really dig into their why and why they're involved in politics, why they care about a certain candidate, but then try to figure out, if their candidate isn't successful, then our candidate, get behind our candidate and help them win at the state, federal level, whatever. So that's kind of how I approach it. Like not calling everybody's baby ugly right off the get, but listening to people and finding out where they come from. Because when you find out where they're coming from, you can better talk to them and rationalize with them and help them understand where you're coming from and hopefully find consensus there.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, especially in a place that can be as polarized as Michigan.
Right.
So what are the policy priorities that you have for Michigan that you guys are working on?
Right now, we have 9 housing zoning bills that we're trying to get pushed through, which ironically falls right into my wheelhouse from dealing with it for almost 30 years professionally and seeing how some of these zoning rules, or if you want to call them, or ordinances, are very impactful in people being able to build the homes that they want on the square footage of lot that they want, the square foot size home they want. And we've got pretty constrictive and restrictive where all these different municipalities across the state have constrained what people can build and said, no, you have to build a 3,500 square foot home, even if you only want a 2,500 square foot home in a certain area. All that to say, a lot of these 9 different zoning bills are trying to claw back what the state has taken away or what the townships have taken away from property owners and homeowners and giving it back to them and say, yes, if you want to build a smaller home, you can do that. If you want to build a accessory dwelling unit for your mother-in-law on your existing house, you can do that. So those are 9 bills, and there'll be more of them in the future, but they're bipartisan, bicameral. The governor actually supports them, which is good. It is getting a lot of pushback from some of the locals who want to have, they don't like government control unless it's the township government control. Unless it's the 6 or 8 guys on that board that want to have that control. So
yeah, I have from spending a few decades in politics. I have some opinions about local politics,
right?
Because it is amazing the control, at least perceived control, that a lot of state legislators allow, like mayors and village presidents and city councils, to have over them. And I'm always like, why don't you listen to your people? Like we talk about property taxes.
Right.
I'm in Illinois, and people are deathly afraid of their local elected officials. And I'm like, this is a 90-10 issue. Why are you not listening to your people?
Right.
Let alone, and everybody loves their mayor, loves their village president, kind of, but there's in my opinion, an outsized voice that I think that groups like Americans for Prosperity can be helpful in right sizing, because when we can amplify the voice of the average homeowner in this case, or the average citizen, then it diminishes, or I like to say right sizes the voice of that local elected official. Because right now, they're well organized. They have their associations, they have their paid lobbyists, they have their own clout and I think sometimes for the legislators, it's just that they don't want the hassle of that mayor calling and bugging them and complaining to them all the time. It seems silly, but really that's a lot of times like, oh, well, my mayor's going to call. I'll hear from all my mayors. Well, just then hear from your mayors. Let's make, as Americans for Prosperity, we want to make it so you hear from your constituents. And there's a lot of them than there are mayors in your district. And we want to make sure that you're scared about hearing from all your constituents about something maybe that mayor might not like.
Yeah, that's 100% the case right now. And, I had somebody challenge me the other day, like, you're just, pushing this from AFP's perspective or whatever. I'm like, well, I am employed by AFP and I do think these are right, but I'm coming at it from someone who built and remodeled homes for almost 30 years, who was a township trustee, who was on a zoning board of appeals, and who also is the chair of our planning commission right now.
Really?
So I'm coming at it from the standpoint that I do want to give more of these rights back to the homeowner. I got tired of sitting on these boards, the zoning board of appeals, for example, where a homeowner wants to build a deck that's 3 inches too big and near a property line. And they got to spend $600, $800, $1,000 come in there for us to say, well, yeah, I guess you can do that. They shouldn't have to do that. Right. As long as these zoning things don't impede on health, safety, and welfare, then they should be able to do it, within reason. And there's one township in our state that has a 40-acre lot minimum size to build a house on it. That's exclusionary in and of itself, right? I mean, 40 acres to build a home, that's nuts. So you're giving up on taxes and all the stuff that could benefit your schools and your township because you're saying you're going to put one house on a 40-acre lot. So we do try to encourage lawmakers that you are going to catch heat from this. You are going to hear from your township, MML and MTA and the groups in the state that are vocal. They're small, but they're very vocal, and they've gotten some lawmakers to kind of maybe push pause a little bit. But we're still moving these through, and they should be out of committee next week, hopefully.
Well, that's great. Yeah. I'll tell you, I was late to the game in that I was like, housing, boring, don't care much about housing is policy. And And I was at a meeting at one of our states, it was down south, and they were talking about who was going to work on their legislative agenda as like the primary, staff member. And a young guy, he was like 25, who's just smart as a whip. He was like, I want to do the housing one. I really want to be in housing. I'm like, why in the world? And he's like, because my generation is so impacted by this. I can't buy a house. Mm-hmm. We can't buy a house for another decade. I'm like, it's so hard to find, a home and to get to a point where we can buy a home, and it's so restrictive. And I was like, oh, wow. And so a few of the other young people I talk about young people now because I'm getting old. A few of the young people are like, yeah, no, we really care about this. This is such an important issue to us. And it kind of opened my eyes like, hey, I've just not been paying, I've been a homeowner for, I don't know, 20 something years, 25 years. And I just kind of thought, well, you graduate up into that. And no, we've changed the American dream to the negative, really, and partially by having such restrictive and exclusionary policies that have just priced people out of the market. And then, you have other businesses buying properties also and all that, but there's just not inventory and affordable stuff for people to get. And so I think it's great work. I'm late to the game. Like I said, I'm glad you guys have been on top of it.
Yeah. And somebody who has 4 adult children who are buying homes or have bought homes, they struggled. I mean, there's not enough inventory. We're like 125,000 units short in Michigan of what we should have. And when you have abundant housing, you have less or more affordable housing. And the average home across the country, before they even put a shovel in the ground, a quarter of the money that you pay for that building goes to the government in one way or another. And if it's a multi-unit, like an apartment unit, 40% of that cost goes to the government in fees and fines and regulations or whatever it takes to get the project built. So if we can claw some of that back, we can have it where in Michigan, the average first-time home buyer is now 39 years old. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I bought my first house, I think my wife and I were in early 20s. But if we can claw back some of those restrictive measures at the zoning level, and then I want to expand on it. When I first started building, the code book was like 3/4 of an inch, maybe thick. Now it's about that thick, like 2.5 inches thick.
Wow.
We don't build better homes. We just build more expensive homes. And that goes right back to the property owner, the citizen, whatever you want to call it, to their pocketbook where they can't afford something. I want to make it where they can afford to live in the house that they want to build, that they want to live in, not one that the government tells them they have to live in.
So as you look ahead to years in the future in Michigan, and obviously it's a state that swings back and forth from a partisan standpoint, what would you like to see happen in Michigan to try to make it a better place for Michiganders?
At the end of 2026 election in November, I would like to see that we have a conservative House and Senate and a governor.
Yeah.
And that would help. And then after that, I want to bring back right to work. I want to get rid of prevailing wage. I want to start clawing back things that give more freedoms and opportunity to the citizens of Michigan. Con reform when it comes to healthcare. I don't think the government...
Certificate of need.
Certificate of need. A hospital shouldn't have to get a permission slip from the government to put an x-ray machine in their thing. And again, I have my wife, several of my daughter-in-laws, my son is a nurse, his wife is a nurse. Lots of nieces and nephews are all nurses in the industry, my sister. And I see the restrictions that's put on them in the healthcare system. We need more doctors. We need reciprocity in licensing. We need foreign doctor stuff. I want to make all that stuff a reality in Michigan. And it is going to take time, but we're building coalitions with people in Lansing. We're building coalitions with people, businesses across and other industry insiders and the grassroots. We can make that happen. We start having these relationships and these conversations. But it takes getting a legislature and a governor elected that want to play in the sandbox nicely and let people have the freedoms and opportunity that, quite frankly, is given to us by the Constitution, and they're supposed to guarantee it, and they've been taking it away little by little, and I want to stop that.
Well, that's a great goal.
Yep.
So one of the things that strikes me about you, we're talking about housing, and you built and remodeled houses. Mm-hmm. You were talking about priorities with regard to the healthcare industry. And I know you worked in medical sales, and you also have a lot of relatives who work in healthcare. And it strikes me that different people come to your role. In this case, we're talking about state directors, different ways. Mine was a normal, I studied political science. I worked for governors. I worked for members of Congress. I ran campaigns. I had to hire, it was kind of a regular pathway. But there was a lot I needed to learn. There's a lot of things I did know from politics, but there's a lot I need to learn going into that job. And it seems to me like you seem like the right guy and the right leader at this time. You have a base of knowledge and kind of a way that you carry yourself for this time in Michigan. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the fascinating things about, when we talk to you and your colleagues, to understand how people come to be involved and to be successful. Looking back, would you have done anything differently, or would you have coached yourself differently in terms of like choices you made or paths you decided to take?
No, I don't think I would have. I have my bachelor's degrees in sports medicine, right? So I have a sports medicine degree. I started a construction company, did that. Then when the economy was bad in 2009, we shut that down for a little bit, and that's when I went and sold orthopedic sales. Through a lot of prayer and discussions with my wife and kids and family, trying to change myself these couple different times really stretched me, grew me. There were struggles at times for sure, but I think those things made me a better person, made me more affable, made me a better listener. And I think, again, like I said before, politics is all about relationships. And I don't have to be right. I don't have to win all the time. I don't have to be, the biggest, loudest voice in the room, but I do want to listen to people. And I think when you show that caring side, that you're not going to get run over all that. You don't want to get, rolled over all the time, but you're willing to listen and see what's best for a community or for a family or for a school. And you take that approach to politics. It's no different than any other relationship. And that was the same thing in business or in marriage and in different relationships that you have. You have to be a good listener, and you have to be willing to compromise, like I said before. And I think that's the approach I've had. So I wouldn't change anything. I don't think I've worked a day in my life. I love what I do. My family likes it. They see the joy that I have in getting up every morning, whether when it was building homes, when it was selling orthopedics, although, 2:00 in the morning to fix a broken hip wasn't all that fun. But now just the joy that I have in doing this, and the people I get to work with are fantastic. Everyone in this organization from top to bottom, I can't say anything bad about them. They're very willing to help, but they all have the same vision and goal and a North Star, and they know that we can accomplish that if we're working together. And I love everything about this organization.
Well, we're certainly glad you're the right man leading us in leading our efforts in Michigan. It is such an important state. There's no more important state when you put it all together for us across in the nation with regard to politics. And super glad that you're doing that for America's prosperity, and you're with us, man.
Appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, folks, if you like this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe to our channels on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.